Welcome back to Simple Truth. We've been in the book of 1 Samuel. Not really sure why I did the dramatic pause, but 1 Samuel, chapter 17, we are like nearing the end, which is finally the part. So in verse 41, this is where everybody knows the story. It's in every children's book, right? This is the story. This is exciting. So you should be able to just fly through this with me. The only problem is when we read familiar stories, God wants you to slow down and He wants you to look for something new. So find something new in this, right? Something you hadn't thought about, right? Something that, hey, wow, that's a good new truth for me to add to my bag, right? Here it is. The Philistine moved forward and came near to David. So we got David approaching the Philistine and the Philistine moving near, right? Here's the truth. The enemy is not afraid of you. He's not afraid to approach you. He's not afraid to come forward. He's not afraid. He's looking at you and going, who are you? Just like this story is going to tell, right? You better be careful when you're moving forward towards the enemy, right? Because the enemy can crush you, and he can crush you in a second, and he can crush you with one look and one thing and one action and one word, and he can crush you. We see it all the time. People who make boisterous claims, I just like the word, right? They make these big, humongous claims. And then the enemy's like, oh yeah, really? Listen, we got pastors who aren't afraid to say anything on a Sunday morning, man. They approach the enemy like crazy. But by Sunday afternoon, they're cowering in their house. Why? Because that's not who they really are. That's not what they're not prepared to really face the enemy. We have people who are singing things on Sunday mornings, doing things on Sunday mornings, being things on Sunday morning, and it's not who they are the rest of the week. Got challenged by that this week. A good friend of mine said, hey, listen, do you think that people who are experiencing all this stuff on Sunday morning are experiencing it at home in their own personal devotional times? The truth is, yeah, no, probably not. Most of them probably aren't. Right? So then does that make it a show or a lifestyle? That's a God thing. God judges the intent, so He's going to tell you whether it's a show or whether it's a lifestyle. But you lean more towards the show when it's only happening for an hour out of 168 in the week. Right? So we got to be careful. Be careful when you're approaching that enemy. Right? When you're approaching the giant, make sure that you're approaching the giant fully armored by God, fully dressed by God. So these guys, they're coming at each other, and you see the difference, right? It's a David versus Goliath thing, right? It says this, moved forward, came near to David with his shield bearer in front of him. I just think that's really funny. Do you know that the enemy knows who he's facing? And lots of times he sacrifices people in front of him. The enemy sacrifices pawns all the time, right? It's why you and I need to get past the pawns and get to the enemy, right? David doesn't even acknowledge the armor bearer, doesn't pay any attention to it, doesn't say, David took out the armor bearer and then he took out the Philistine, right? He doesn't pay attention to the armor bearer. Don't get sidetracked with the enemy's pawns. He's going to throw a ton of them at you. Loud mouth, loud actioned, really insecure people who are going to speak for him, going to hold his armor, going to do all this stuff. But they're not fighting the battle. The enemy is he's willing to throw them away. You should have compassion for these people, right? They're being used. Whether they're doing it intentionally or unintentionally, they're being used by the enemy. There's a lot of people holding the armor of the enemy, right? Be careful that you make sure you don't get sidetracked. David could have used his energy, right, his resources to fight the armor bearer and not fight the real enemy. Fight the real enemy, right? Why in the world does it say anything about this armor bearer, right? It says this, with his shield bearer in front of him. And when the Philistine looked and saw David, he disdained him, for he was but a youth, ruddy and handsome in appearance. Isn't that funny what God does to appearance? Yeah, there's people that just drive you nuts because their countenance is for Jesus. Because they got this little grin and this goofy thing going on, and you just know they've been with Jesus and they're excited about life and they got it and they know something that you don't know, right? The enemy hates that. He hates it because you know what God does? God transforms people. God changes our appearance. God, when He's ready and when He's willing to work, I want you to understand this. The enemy was using Goliath as well as the shield bearer, right? And the enemy of God knew he was sacrificing Goliath right now. He knew it. What he's hoping is that he can make enough noise, enough stuff that it chases David from the fight, that David doesn't stay in the fight. But do you know the enemy knows you're going to win? Do you know the enemy knows that he loses? You know that, right? He tries to be as loud as he can. He tries to do all kinds of things because he wants you and I to run from the battle before it ever starts. Big, loud, hairy, ugly, right, guy coming at David, right? And so David seeing this, we see that all the time when there's a meeting set up for you, and on Friday you're going to meet with your boss, and you got all week to think about it. It's that giant that's sitting out there. Things aren't going well in your relationships. They're not going well at church. You got a bill that's due. You got a doctor's appointment coming up. Those giants that are way out here. They're way, way out here. And they just loom over us. And that's enough. Usually that's enough to scare us and get us off track. I got a doctor's appointment. I must be dying. They called me in. They told me this. All these things could be wrong. Our head goes a million miles an hour. So-and-so asked to talk to me. Oh, they must be mad at me. They're going to fire me. They're going to get rid of me. They don't like me. I made a mistake. They caught me. Right? Whatever it is. Right? These meetings that are out here that act as the giant. These moments that are giant moments. Got a job interview. Right? But if that doesn't work, the enemy goes to step 2. If just the sight of the enemy coming towards you is enough, step 2 is the enemy opens his mouth. Notice what it says. The Philistine said to David, "Am I a dog that you come to me with sticks?" The enemy looks at you and says, "Who are you? Why would God use you? How would God use you?" Oh, wait, have you heard those questions before? Have you heard those questions in your head before? Why would God use me? Why would God choose me? How come God would choose to use me? Why would God use me? Why would God use me? Like, what's the point? What's the purpose? Like, God would never use you. You're a loser. God's not going to use you. Look at where you've been. Look at what you've been through. Look at how small you are. Look at how insignificant you are. Look at how you've never done these things before. Look at how you are immature in your faith. Look at all these things. Right? We know what happens because Paul had to remind Timothy, don't let them do it. Don't let them get down on you because you're youth. Don't listen to it. But we've all seen the eye rolling. We've all seen the people who, they're looking at us as we're getting ready to teach, or we stand up to preach, and they're like, we've all seen the actions, but when words follow, it's a problem, right? Because the words get into our heart, they get into our mind, and we start chewing on them. The enemy loves to hand out biscuits. He wants you to chew on stuff. Chew on it some more, right? Are they mad at me? Are they mad at me? Are they mad at me? Listen, when you're a people pleaser like me, everybody's always mad at you or they really love you. Those are the two choices. When somebody's just having a rough day, it throws my world into chaos because I assume you either love me or you don't love me. It can't possibly be that you have anything else that you're thinking about in your life other than me. Right? This can cause a lot of damage because mine is I want you to be cheerful and perky, and if you're not, I'm going to try to make you that way. But if you can't get there, then that creates a great frustration for me. Sometimes it's not about that. But the enemy is going to talk, and he's going to use buzzwords, and he's going to use things that he knows work on you, and he's going to use all the things. He's going to use somebody else said this in the most intimate of moments, in the most crummy of moments, in the most arduous of moments. He's going to take all that information, and he's going to use it, right? Philistine cursed David by his gods. Hey, again, notice what people love to do. They love to tell us about their gods. You don't have enough money. You don't have enough knowledge. You don't have enough power. You don't have enough authority. You don't have enough. Those are all gods, all lowercase gods. The enemy's going to throw that out. Andy, you'll never get a castle. Why? You don't have enough resources. Everybody knows how much money it takes to build a castle. Everybody knows how much money I don't have. If I sold all my swords, all my horses, all my cows, and every other little tiny thing I own, which are not very much in nature, but if I sold all those things, I still couldn't afford one billionth of a castle. Right? It's just not going to work. And the enemy wants to remind you, hey, and hey, right? It's funny. Because then he goes on and he tells David what's going to happen. Because he could have stopped right there. But then he says in verse 44, the Philistine said to David, come to me, and I will give your flesh to the birds in the air and the beasts of the field. I know you've heard this before. You open up your mouth and look what's going to happen. You do this and what's going to happen? People are going to find out. People are going to find out. God's not. People are going to know what you did. People are going to know what you said. People are going to do this. He's going to feed your flesh. Like, this is going to end disastrously. There's no way this works out. This ends poorly, 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 poorly every single time. Listen, I want you to know this. Here's the simple truth. The enemy has a lot to say about a assured, right, loss for him. He has a lot to say about a loss. He knows he's going to lose. He just thinks, if I can act and talk, I can maybe get you to submit before you ever fight. Do you know the battle's won before you ever fight? Before you ever fight, you won the battle because of Jesus. And what Jesus did on the cross, he won every single battle. It might not turn out the way that you want it to be. It's not defined as a victory for you. It's defined as a victory for God because he's the chess king and you're just on the chessboard. You know, in this section, it talks about Goliath cursing God by his gods. It's a lower G. Guess what happens? Often you and I make that lower G a capital G. And we make the money become the God. We make the fame become the God. The authority become the God. The power become the God. We make these things happen. And God says, hey, listen, make me the capital G God. And you don't have to worry about all this stuff. So be simple truth. Don't let the enemy talk you out, look you out, make you out to be a loser. Because you're not. You're a winner. And you got this before you ever started the fight. Your job is to let God dress you. Let God armor you, right? Be ready, know how to use the things that God gives you, right? Don't be against the practicing and the waiting, and that we're going to stop right there because that's going to make me have to get a scrunchy face, right? Don't be afraid of those. God's just trying to give you the ability to use things so that you can walk towards the enemy. Walk towards your enemy today, confident that you got this. We'll see you next time on Simple Truth.